Von Fry, legendary badass, not shy, telling you how it is, Von Fry will die.
A few days back, my folks ordered through on demand on the cable box Star Trek Into Darkness. Now, this was a movie I was avoiding because though I liked Star Trek 2009 and it was one of the earliest video reviews I did in the Vaughn on Movies style, man, that was 4 years ago. Does anybody even remember that? I kind of felt that they took a chance with the people calling the old one a reboot. And yeah, this is more of a rant than a review. I'm not going to be doing any fancy edits or any of that. You know, people called that a reboot, but I looked at it like, no, maybe not actually, because they renewed the characters by putting them in a different timeline, making it acceptable for the old Trekkies to still find canon in their old stories. And I was thinking, yeah, this could be interesting. We have new adventures. But then as this movie's information came out, you know, the plot details, is this guy Khan, things like that, it became more apparent to me that J.J. Abrams, who, mind you, is the biggest hack douche in Hollywood. No original ideas. Look at his movies. They're sequels and a blowjob to Steven Spielberg. So, it became more apparent that Star Trek 2009 was actually a plan to remake all the Star Trek classic stories. Horribly so. And you could say this isn't a Star Trek film, because I saw things that looked more Star Wars. There was... Okay, with Star Trek, there's such a buttoned-down attitude that prevails throughout the action. We have our uniforms, we have our coda, rules and regulations. They mention the Prime Directive here, which I would like somebody to tell me. Was the Prime Directive in the original series? Because I've watched about a dozen episodes through Netflix. I haven't heard any talk about Prime Directive. I know it comes up on occasion on Next Generation, so is that something they create with Next Generation? But Prime Directive comes in, and it's like Bones and Kirk are running away from some natives on some planet that has a volcano that's about to go off. Meanwhile, Spock is inside the volcano about to detonate a cold fusion device, which cold fusion doesn't work that way. It doesn't like freeze everything. It's not like Sub-Zero's freeze blast. So I just thought that was bull. But then you have to look at it and be like, you know, the very first shot in this movie is garbage. It's a CGI composed shot, bird's eye view, that does the crash zoom. And I know that this got popularized by the Battlestar Galactica reboot with the documentary style, or actually it's more like amateur style photography in the CGI shots, because you're like, oh yeah, well since it's CGI there's no reason for the camera to be moving at all, but it's so much more real that it is. No. Documentary footage, for someone who watches an ass... I guarantee you, none of you have watched more documentaries this year than I have. I'm a film festival programmer. I've probably seen 200. It's not a documentary film technique to do this crash zoom bullshit, shaky cam ass. It's amateur is what it is. It takes me out of the movie because no one watches an event like this. Your brain doesn't process the images the way it ends up on the screen. So the very first shot's just bollocks. And then you're thinking like, okay, you're interfering with the planet's natural progression, the volcano going off. That's against the Prime Directive. Showing the the Enterprise is against the Prime Directive too, so where's Spock's argument to stand on? How come everybody is so abhorrently unprofessional? Particularly this new Kirk. I mean, he's just like... He went to the Shia LaBeouf school of acting where he's like a frantic teenager at all times. And then we put the same training wheels back on. It's like, well, you violated that order, says Pike. Now I'm in charge. And I'm like, well, we know he's going to die because Kirk's got to be in charge again. We got this guy, Harrison Khan. And, you know, I'm not going to go into too many details about everything in the plot, but he's white. He currently has no vendetta against the Enterprise crew. So this movie tries to combine the Genesis elements of the Space Seed episode and the Wrath of Khan. They make that into one movie, essentially. Or even you could say that this movie ends so that they could do the Wrath of Khan again and have it be a strictly revenge-based story. But, the plot in this movie is... I think there's a certain technique that they're doing these days, and Abrams is kind of like the pioneer of this. You know, if you want to give him pioneer credit, it's. I think you could call it. I'm gonna come up with a name for this. Bullshit filmmaking. Like you had like montages at times. In the 80s, the montage was still strong. You have the training montage, right? You know, Rocky. This is bullshit filmmaking. The plot's throwing so much bullshit at you that you're like, when it just goes and you can't even process it. It's like, yeah, so I'm doing this and this and this, and then we're going to do that and this, and then and then why did he steal that ship? You're telling us things that we never saw for no good reason. This isn't a movie that strictly follows Kirk from like that kind of narrative. I mean, it's not like Memento or something where he's going to be in like every shot. And you're telling us like this Harrison, he escaped, stole a ship, but why did he steal a ship that goes to war? You just can't process all the things going on. There's so much bullshit. There's so much shit to look at. And then people are talking and you have no idea if what they're saying is going to be important or not. And you can't process. You can't go like, that makes sense, that doesn't, that makes sense, that doesn't. There's no time for it. It's just absolute garbage to the plot. It progresses, and there's, just a couple of other things I want to touch on here. The special effects are amazing. Like, this is some of the best CGI work I've seen in a movie. At no time, and this happened in the 2009 film, particularly you watch it on TV, you're like, yeah, that looks like they're against a green screen. This looked so genuine, and, I challenge anybody to really say that the Avengers looked better. That fight they're having on the freeway with faceless goons in the Avengers looks like a studio. It couldn't look any less outdoors. This looked great. Okay, Alice Eve, you suck. You're terrible in everything I've seen you in. You are here because you have big knockers and you like to whip them out shamelessly. So what do? From all I saw, and it might have been some differences, but it looked like she just walked into a room to take her clothes off to put on the same uniform. Or at least one that had no different function than the uniform she was already wearing. And yeah, you're quite convincing as a weapons expert. The worst part of this movie, in fact, I wasn't too much hating it until this moment when I swear they had a Skype conference call with Leonard Nimoy. And this is the only time I've ever seen this in a movie where the movie actually calls up the movie it's ripping off. And they're like, Doodaloo, hi, this is Star Trek Into Darkness. Yeah, this is the Wrath of Khan, right? Oh, good. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, well, the kids, they grow up so fast, yeah. Hey, I want to tell you, how can we better rip off your movie? Oh, he's the bad guy. Oh, okay, thank you. Infinite face palms for that. After that, I mean, it really gets to be like a 10-year-old wrote this garbage. You have verbatim ripping off of Spock's death scene that just made me and my folks moan and groan, completely regretting that we rented the movie. But they put Kirk in it, and you're supposed to be like, oh, it's so cool. George Lucas would be like, it's poetry, it rhymes, right? But it's ass. It is really what it is. And by the end of it all, of course, they're able to resurrect him through trials by injecting Trebles with human blood. It's just absolute garbage. There's, for the most part, I like the cast, and I like the special effects, so I'd give the movie like 2 stars on that. But everything else is so bad, it makes you question whether or not you can rate movies anymore these days. Because it's kind of like somebody else's version of a story is what every movie's going to be. Kids are going to grow up and be like, maybe someday I'll get to be Kirk. Not, maybe someday I'll get to be the heroic captain of a Star Trek franchise. Or even, maybe someday I'll make my own franchise. I'll cut my own path. No. Kids these days are going to grow up and be like, maybe someday I'll get to rip off J.J. Abrams. FML. Another thing about this, I promise no edits. What are you going to do about it? Here's how I think that they went about making this movie, or even their secretive way of relaunching the Star Trek film franchise through the now, I guess we could call it a reboot. That is the 2009 film. They could say, we want to redo The Wrath of Khan. We have to set this up in a way that we're making a Star Trek film for people who have not seen The Wrath of Khan. This movie really only works if you have no knowledge of The Wrath of Khan. They say, maybe 1 billion people have seen The Wrath of Khan, but there's 7 billion people in this world. Let's make a movie for that other 6 billion. We can make more money that way. We don't have to stick to the formula that is Star Trek when we can make something that's broader, has more sex appeal because the blonde chick getting the lingerie on, that has the more Star Wars style action. We don't have to appeal to the people that have already seen The Wrath of Khan when there's so many more out there we can manipulate. So, Trekkies, what do you have to say about that? Did they make your movie? Is this something you can stand by? Do you like seeing your franchise get plundered? Are you standing by Star Trek?
Do 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 do.